that's really only something that I've understood fully as a consequence of making this film. And having gone back there last year to film in China, to actually hear firsthand the testimonies of those whose lives were, as I say, shaped by Wham's performances.
So, Andrew, early in the film, you call the trip to China in 1985 cynical. Why?
Really, I should have said calculated. Cynical is a bit strong, I think. But certainly it was a calculated, strategic decision based upon the fact that we wanted to elevate our profile in the States to a level which would enable us to be really tour the stadiums, to become a household name. And such was the fascination, the US fascination with China at that point in time. China was really just opening up economically and to a lesser extent culturally. That it was a pretty, it was risky, and when the idea was proposed to George and I by Simon Napier-Benn, our manager, I thought it was a lunatic idea, to be honest. But it was that or nout. So, because George had suffered with, he had undiagnosed polyps on his vocal cords at that point in time. His voice had broken down on the Club Fantastic tour, and he wasn't going to risk that. And in order to consolidate our success in the States, we'd have had to, ordinarily, we'd have toured an arena tour which had been, anything from 30 to 90 dates. So he wasn't going to do that. So Simon, is a very clever man and had, big ideas. He conceived that. And, ultimately it worked, much against my expectations.
I didn't realise until I'd read a little bit of background as well that Simon was essentially competing with Queen, who also wanted to be the first band in China, and managed to win by essentially sending propaganda, anti-Queen propaganda, to China in advance of your trip.
That wouldn't surprise me. I know that that Queen were, and I think not just Queen, I think Elton as well perhaps was looking at going over there, but I didn't realise. Simon wouldn't be. Subterfuge would definitely be a part of his armoury.
So you were very aware, you and George, that it was a strategic trip. Were you also aware of what it meant symbolically, particularly to young Chinese people?
No, not at that point in time. I think that's really only something that I've understood fully as a consequence of making this film. And having gone back there last year to film in China, to actually hear firsthand the testimonies of those whose lives were, as I say, shaped by Wham's performances, who took decisions based upon the exposure to Wham and Wham's music, took decisions that altered the course of their life. And in the case of Sui Zhan, he's become the biggest rock star in China. DJ Paul is one of the biggest music moguls over there, and it was that moment that defined the rest of their lives. So that's very moving and humbling, is the best way I can describe it. Experience to meet those people and to know that Wham had that effect.
Part of the reason there's so much footage from the time at which enabled this documentary to be made is because it was being shot for a documentary at the time, but that never aired. Why not?
Well, our director, it was conceived in a hurry. The idea to film it, and it was conceived in order to claw back, as I say in the film, some of the great costs it cost to go there, and a director was chosen. That director was Lindsay Anderson, who was a revered director in his genre. You'll know he focused on sort of social films with the social conscience. But he was not the right director for Wham in China. I thought it was a crazy idea. George liked the idea because it conferred credibility and status. But it was a disaster, really. Lindsay only did it for the money. He didn't. What was really odd was he was a dyed-in-the-wool socialist, but had hated Russia and hated being in China. Probably because he was a champagne socialist. But yeah, so it didn't work out. It didn't work out for him. Didn't work out for us. And the documentary that was made, that it was as dull as dishwater, and it wasn't what we wanted. It wasn't fit for purpose. So Andy Morahan, who we worked with on our pop videos, Wake Me Up, Last Christmas, amongst others, he re-edited it, and it was essentially a long-form pop promo, which was exactly what we needed at the time. This is very different. This is a retrospective. This is discovering the legacy, such as it is in China. It speaks with a lot of the protagonists, the press, the band, the observers. So it's a proper overview of that trip from start to finish. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find any of the Chinese officials who were party to the actual decision and part of the bringing us over. Whether they're still alive or not, who knows? But that element's missing. But there's enough about the trip as a whole to give people a real insight. And it's frank, it's authentic, it's genuine, it's amusing at times.
Very amusing at times.
Yeah, I watched it for only the second time last night. There was a screening, and there's some really funny moments there. Some of the looks off camera and the asides are really very funny, and it's because of that. It's a very genuinely authentic, as I remember us being there. So Mike Christie, our director, has really captured the genuine feeling of being there and of us being there.
I mean, you were 22, George was 21. How much did you know about China and the situation there and people's lives there before you embarked on this?
Well, we knew communist China insofar as, when I say we knew communist China, we knew it would be very different. We knew our history wasn't fantastic, but China had gone through the Cultural Revolution, and it was a difficult place for those people who were living there, that's for sure. And we had an idea of what to expect.
Did you know how devoid it was of popular culture?
No, I don't think we did. I don't think we realised that Western pop music really, apart from Guangzhou, was different because of its proximity to Hong Kong and because they got Hong Kong radio, but Beijing was entirely different, and very few had actually, I think, heard Western pop music. There's a scene in the film which is brilliant, which is people listening to Wake Me Up and hearing, and it's Western pop music for the very first time. And some of the looks are brilliant.
Yeah, when they're in the shop listening on the cassette player to a tape of Wake Me Up, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But also, I mean, there's amazing shots of people's physical reactions to your performance as well, particularly in Beijing. I mean, they were told to stay in their seats by the police because the police were so worried about their response to your music for the first time, and they were worried they couldn't keep order. What was it like to actually play to that audience who were being, pulled out by police, told to stay in their seats?
Well, we understood it wasn't going to be a show of the like that we were used to. We knew that the reception would be muted, but I think we had our support act, was a break dancer, and he had gone into the audience, which I think wasn't planned. Certainly we didn't know that that was going to be part of his show. And I don't think the authorities, I think that put the wind up the authorities. so at the break between him and us going on, that yes, you're right, they asked the audience to remain in their seats, to be still. And there were one or two who were hoiked out as a consequence of over exuberance. We didn't see any of that because we're in front of the lights and you can't see the audience. So, but I think as the show went on, I think they realised they weren't going to have a riot, and so therefore they eased off a little bit, because there is footage and there's some great moments of the kind of sheer wonder. There's one scene where there's a young child on someone's lap, and they're just looking agog, and it's an incredible. It's very powerful to know that you were part of that. Producing that effect in someone, especially a young child, so quite very touching, and testament to the power and the emotional strength of music in general,
and particularly in a place like China, which was about to go through massive changes. I found it really moving to hear people saying about Wham being like a window and opening their minds, and they suddenly understood their own appetite for freedom.
Yes, Sway. I think it may have been Sui Zhen who made that point, and yeah, to have illustrated to you a different universe. Must have been an incredible moment for those people, and certainly as a consequence of the performances, there were some whose lives were shaped by decisions made as a consequence of seeing Wham's performances. So yeah, that's only something that we understood nothing of the legacy prior, because there had been not a peep out of China, and we knew nothing, since 1985. When we left, it was like leaving the Mary Celeste. Nothing, heard nothing again. So yes, it was revealing and rewarding to go back there and to hear the legacy from the people who are the living legacy.
Yeah.
Of
How different was China going back 40 years on?
Well, yeah, very. All the scooters and motorbikes are electric in Beijing. There's no combustion engine. Wow. And when we were there in '85, there were bicycles and horses and carts. Yeah, there were buses and cars, but they were. I mean, the traffic there is unholy. I mean, you think London's bad, Beijing is just extraordinary. So it's a modern city, huge underground, and the food's as good as I remember it being, though. So that some things don't change.
Those don't change. Yeah. You talked about the relationship with your director being quite fractious. Your relationship with the press pack on tour with you is shown as also being quite fractious. Was it always that antagonistic for you?
It became that way, yeah. Partly because of the way I responded, partly because I think the press I'm not sure they liked us very much. I'm not sure that we we played the game the way that they may have wished. But you know, it was as I said, it was a Faustian pact. You know, we needed them to be there. They needed to cover us being there. Wham was big news. And so it was, you know, we made for uncomfortable bedfellows. It was the evolution of Wham's relationship with the press. You know, it started off, you know, fairly well, and then the music press turned against us because when they discovered that we weren't, you know, leading hordes of youngsters through the streets in revolution. We were, you know, a consummate pop act, if you like. They felt rather let down, and also they were disparaging about the music, and of course George took that very personally because as a songwriter and a producer and arranger and musician, they're extremely competent records, and you know, lots of people knew that, but there were elements of the music press that weren't prepared to recognise that. So there was a bit of there was friction there, and there was a bit of kickback from us as a consequence, and that I think that spilled over into our relationship with the tabloids, not least because neither of us wanted our private. We felt our private lives were our own affairs. I hadn't grown up in a family that had any notion of celebrity. We just weren't interested in that whatsoever. And you know, our success begat celebrity, but it wasn't what we were in it for. And it was unwelcome. And that was part of the antagonistic relationship.
With that celebrity that came with Wham pretty quickly, was there some sense of relief for you when in 1986 George's solo career took off and you decided to kind of end the band?
Well, we made that decision 18 months or more in advance. It became very clear to us both when George asked me if he could release Careless Whisper as a solo record in early '84. I don't quite remember. He might even have been the last part of 80. I don't think it was. But and so, you know, we knew that his songwriting was developing in a way, and also that he would develop as an artist that had to step beyond Wham in order to be able to fulfill his artistic destiny. That, you know, the songwriter and the artist that George Michael would become, the constraints imposed by Wham simply wouldn't allow him to develop in the way he would. So we knew that early on. So
even in China, you knew it was going to come to an end.
Yeah. But you know, neither of us were going to bring Wham to a close until we'd done the job and achieved our aim of making Wham the biggest pop band, you know, that we possibly could.
So even though you didn't want it for the long term, you were still very ambitious for the band.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it was really important for George and I to make Wham the preeminent pop band of its age. That was, you know, that ambition developed. It wasn't our ambition necessarily. You know, when we were in a school band, a record deal was that was it. That was the holy grail. You know, record deal. Then it was a hit record. Then it was a number. So those ambitions, they grow, and so we weren't going to draw a line under Wham until we'd achieved what we wanted to achieve. We achieved those things far quicker, I think, than we'd imagined we might. And so when we stepped off stage on June 28th, 1986, yes, there was relief that I wasn't going to have to endure that sort of press scrutiny on a daily basis, even though I had brought some upon myself, and it didn't it didn't effectively end there either. But nevertheless, yeah, it was a relief.
Did you miss it though once it was gone? Not the scrutiny, the band.
Yes, not in the immediate aftermath actually, but you know, I went on stage with Yog several times after we brought Wham to a close, but yeah, there was always the odd moment where you think, yeah, how fab it would be to perform again, because that's what you form a band to do. You form a band to write songs and play them, and so that's the nub of it. And as I say in the film, everything else is just white noise. So yeah, there've been times watching the film, you know, but there's no Wham without George Michael. So there was never a prospect. You know, we said that we discussed it. You know, we would never reform Wham, because Wham was a moment in time. Wham was about our youth. It was about the vibrancy and vitality of youth. Wham doesn't age. You know, we did, but Wham doesn't.
So if George was still alive today, you wouldn't be doing an Oasis and reforming for 4 sellout nights somewhere?
Yeah. No, it'd be tempting, but no, I don't think we would. No.
With
you
George,
can't really, you know, 63 years old doing Young Guns or Bad Boys.
have you seen the Rolling Stones?
Well, yeah, they don't do Young Guns or Bad Boys. So.
With George not being here,
Satisfaction's a bit different, isn't it?
It is, yeah. With George not being here, do you feel a double responsibility to protect the legacy of the band and to speak about it, you know, in the way that you do, you know, the decisions you made together?
I've not, to be honest, I've not really thought of it in those terms. It's important to maintain Wham, its position in the pop firmament. That music, it endures. It appeals still, especially to youngsters. You know, when I see kiddies and their response to the music, when I do the odd signing or whatever it is, and mums and dads bring their kids along, and you know, and the kids are 4 or 5 years old, and they're absolutely, you know, absolutely love the music, because has an appeal, it has a vibrancy, as I said, and a kind of vitality, I think, that people respond to innately, and that, you know, that endures. That's there. It's in the music. It's in the records. It doesn't fade. Unlike the members of the band. So yeah, it's you know, the George Michael legacy is distinct from the Wham legacy, and that has its own place, and there's some projects coming out over the next couple of years, I think, that will help in you know, his place in the rock pantheon of gods is assured. Yeah, it's a privilege to be able to develop the Wham legacy. There's still such a big groundswell of affection for Wham, whether it be in new audiences or existing audiences. People seem still to want more of it.
Would you still do a Wham musical? Is that still a plan?
There are a lot of legacy, there are several legacy projects, I think, that Wham would be much suited to. Yeah, that's one of them. You know, as we move into the future with Wham legacy, we're not going to be doing any more China documentaries, and we're not going to be doing any more, you know, Wham the Wham documentary. So yeah, the alternative legacy projects we will need to consider. I mean, I think personally, a musical could be fab, a biopic could be fab, you know, a voyage type project could be fab. All those things may be potentially possible in the future. I would hope so.